I don't think it necessarily works all the time, but I'm glad that they at least make the effort rather than just phoning it in. And writing some super forgettable... Oh, never mind. We'll just cut that. Okay. Moving on. Into the unknown. I kind of knew I was going to do clean guitars, and then it was going to have to kick in to like the metal stuff. If you listen, there's this piano part in the intro. Bum, 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 bum. I can hear you. So you can hear the piano's doing this like bum 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 bum, and then it's got this doodle 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 kind of thing happening. So I figured out how to play that on piano, and then I transposed it down to the key that I was playing in. And I had to figure out how to kind of interpret that on guitar. So I ended up doing this. Now what's interesting is I could have done this. I could have gone... Could have do that, because that's what the piano does. And part of me was like, why didn't I do that? And I think at the time, this actually feels kind of weird. I think it was just a little tricky to play. And then later I had the idea to add harmonies. And I would have had to go like that. I think this was just one of those things where I felt like it was more trouble than it was worth, and I just wanted to keep things kind of simple for myself. So I didn't worry about it. I might have to revisit that, because that's actually kind of cool. A little sort of bluesy descent thing. That's one thing I'll give the songwriters credit for, is I've noticed they do use a lot of really cool techniques and weird chords. Like even the song, the original version is in G-sharp Dorian. So it's in like a really weird scale. Now I don't know if it stays in that key for the whole song. I think it changes at a few places. But they do use some pretty weird chords, and that's something that I can appreciate. I don't think it necessarily works all the time, but I'm glad that they at least make the effort rather than just phoning it in. So then the tricky part was having to write like the rest of the clean guitar. Again, you can see here I've got it looped because I could only play it for like one measure and then I'd mess up. And then here I had to play each section individually, and I've got these fades to kind of smooth it out, but it's so funny looking back at this because it was challenging to play, and so I had to kind of like stitch it together and sort of create this Frankenstein version of it. So here's the guitar. And you can hear it sounds kind of loopy. And then here's the transitions. And I don't know if it's just because this project is using up a lot of CPU, but yeah, it sounds pretty janky. And then I've got this harmony part. And to be honest, when I heard that, like that beginning, just that slight crunch clean tone with the harmony guitars, I was like, ooh, that's pretty good. You know, if I do say so myself, I think that's pretty good. And then, as you know, in the song there's that distant voice, and I had a friend say that she thought that was really annoying, and so that's a nice thing to hear when you're doing a cover of a song that they think is annoying, and I'm like, oh gosh, how am I going to do this? But I interpreted it with a distant guitar, which I think sounds pretty cool. But I really only used it where it needed to be. I didn't want it to overstay its welcome. In the original song, when the chorus ends, they do it for 2 measures or something like that. You know, like they do it twice, and I just do it once and then go right back into it, which I felt like doing it twice was kind of dragging it out anyway, so I was trying to trim this down as best as I could, because even the original arrangement, the other thing with a lot of pop songs is the 3:30 mark is kind of that sweet spot. Maybe 4 minutes on the top end, 3 minutes on the low end, but 3:30 is kind of that sweet spot for most songs. But here's the thing. Whatever time limit you choose, your song has to be engaging. Just because your song is 3 minutes and 30 seconds long, it might feel longer if it's not engaging. I think of a band like Between the Buried and Me. They write 10-minute songs, and part of the reason that works is because you feel like you're going on a journey, like a story is unfolding as you listen to their music. So there's always something interesting happening. To be honest, I don't even know how they did it. As a young songwriter, I used to write like a lot of sections. I'd write an intro, a verse, I'd write a pre-chorus, a chorus, a post-chorus, and then I would repeat. And I'd write all of that, and my songs would end up being like 5 or 6 minutes long. But again, somehow in this song, they've ended up writing like so many sections, they still get into the chorus a minute into the song. Like, I don't know how they did that. Like, they write so many sections, but then it almost feels like the song was going to be too short and wasn't going to reach that point. And so it feels like they were trying to stretch it out, and I don't think the song benefited from that. Even in the Panic of the Disco version, they kind of compensate for that by doing the chorus at the very beginning of the song and then going into the verses. And even that's still a relatively short song. My version ended up coming out just being 2 minutes and 55 seconds, so under 3 minutes. But I feel like for this song, that's what's best for it. Like, don't drag it out, don't overstay your welcome. So I remember listening to the demo version of the song, and I always felt like it was kind of dragging. Like, it was almost there, but it just needed a little more oomph. So I did end up speeding up the tempo. The original tempo was 105 BPM, and I moved it up to 107. So yeah, that was pretty much my writing process for this song. Aside from that, here's my vocal template. I kind of forgot that this song was sort of designed to highlight the vocals, so I'm like, crap, I'm gonna have to really work on my vocals. I might make another video talking about this, but basically I practiced the vocals and then I would record them and sort of break it up and choose which parts I felt like sounded good and which parts needed work. And so I've got like this weak section down here, so that was the stuff that I would start practicing and kind of recording my voice, trying different things to see what worked best for that section. And basically I stitched together this kind of collection of all the good versions and then practiced singing it like that, so that when I went to sing it for real, I could hopefully pull that off. And I mean, it helped. The recording process for the vocals went by so much smoother than it usually does. And then I'll show you real quickly my mixing project. So yeah, this is pretty much the final product. I mean, before mastering, you know, this is the whole mixing product, but I've got the finished drums right here. And I'm pretty pleased with how those came out. Since the very first beat has toms in it, I kind of needed to up my tom game, because in the past the toms were just kind of there. They weren't really that great sounding. But I tried some new techniques that made these come out a lot better. I used some higher toms, so they were a bit tangier, and I used some processing techniques just to make them more exciting. So I was really pleased with how that came out. And then I really tried to push more of the drum room into the mix. I think before I've been a bit too subtle with it, and the drums come out sounding really dry, so I really wanted to put them in a space. I've got the sub here. Fun little fact, this sub comes from the Nail the Mix session with Nolly Gitgood. He says he uses them in almost every project, so I kind of do the same thing. And I just use them at key moments, so like when the song first kicks in, and every time we go into the chorus, going into the guitar solo, and then the very last hit of the song. We've got the guitars, they sound a lot better than the writing version. So they're a lot tighter, and you can hear that high end a lot better. So they work well. And they create a nice contrast, because if you think about it, the verses are very contained. We're playing just single notes, and we're palm muting a lot of that. And even speed picking, we're just palm muting single notes. So that, compared to these really big full chords in the chorus, like creates this big dynamic. It helps make the chorus sound a lot bigger. The guitar solo sounds a lot tighter. The tone is almost a little overhyped, but I kind of like it. I think it's appropriate for that section. I am thinking of experimenting with some other amp sims for my lead guitar, but that one's good enough to get the job done for now. Believe it or not, all these yellow tracks are the vocal track, and they're all just one part. These aren't backup vocals or anything like that. I thought about doing like harmonies and maybe some background screams or something to kind of help support and make the vocals more exciting. But again, I just felt like I needed to make this as simple on myself as I could. And even the other versions really just had the one vocal. They didn't have too many other parts, unless you count the echo voice thingy. So I just did the one recording just of my voice, and then I did a few things to just help it stick out. So I've got the main track here, which is just the dry track, but I am sending it to a room, so it's got like a little bit of reverb on it. But I won't. Some look for trouble, while others don't. And then from there, I've got these two tracks. This one's called Vocal Air. This is actually the exact same track, but if you look at the EQ, I'm cutting out pretty much everything except the very top end, so it's kind of got some sizzle. And I don't even know if you can hear this, but I'll try to crank it up. It's turned way down in the mix, but you blend it in with the original vocal, and it just kind of opens it up. So listen to like without it and with it. Into the unknown, into the unknown. You hear how it just kind of opens up the voice, like when you add it in there. Without it, the voice is just kind of a little muted sounding. And then the other thing I have is some parallel compression. What compression is, for those of you who don't know, the voice is very dynamic. There are parts where it sings really loud, and then it gets really quiet. And the problem with a mix like this with all these instruments, when it's quiet, it might kind of duck behind everything and be hard to hear, and then all of a sudden it just kind of jumps out and gets loud. So you want the voice to sit in place. So that's what compression does. Compression kind of turns down those peaks so that the voice is less dynamic and it kind of stays at a relative motion. But the more you compress it, the less natural it sounds. So what you can do is you only do a little bit of compression on your main vocal so that it still sounds pretty natural, but then you create another version that is heavily compressed. Into the unknown. So you can hear that's like heavily compressed, and if you look at the meter, it's just like pinned at that certain spot. It's not like jumping up and down or anything like that. So what you do is you blend that in, and it kind of makes a nice foundation for the main vocal so that it just gives it kind of a solid anchor for its place in the mix. Into the unknown. So that's helpful, and then the only other thing I do is, I used to have a problem with delay because it would sound good at some places, and then some words it would sound really muddy. So what I learned is it's actually best just to create a track just for delay, and you just kind of cut out the parts where you want the delay. So you'll notice it's just on that last syllable. So I'm cutting out everything else, and just on the last syllable I have the delay. Into the unknown. Into the and without the delay. Follow you into the unknown. Into the it's just kind of dry. It doesn't have that, you know, epicness to it. But yeah, that's what went into the making of the song. So hopefully you found that interesting. This was a pretty fun little project to work on. I certainly learned a lot from this, and hopefully you learned some stuff that you can take and apply to your own projects. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.